Pull back far enough from Chinese history and the textbooks tell a story of dynastic succession. Qin, Han, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming. The main narrative appears to be an internal cycle of rise and fall. But shift the gaze from the imperial court to the northern frontier, and an entirely different storyline emerges. A single war that lasted 2,000 years. Not a war between two countries, but a war between two civilizations. Those who farmed and those who rode. This one front shaped the fate of nearly every Chinese dynasty. And the cruelest part is that it was never resolved. Not because the agrarian empire was too weak, precisely the opposite. The very system that allowed China to reunify again and again was itself the reason it could never win in the north. Over 2 millennia, the Central Plains tried nearly every conceivable strategy. The first was the most instinctive: build a wall. After unifying the 6 kingdoms, the first emperor of Qin connected scattered northern fortifications into a single line: the Great Wall. The wall was never meant to block enemies entirely. It was meant to change the rules of engagement, forcing nomadic cavalry out of their fluid raiding patterns and into fixed choke points. This was the first time an agrarian civilization tried to counter mobility with engineering. The logic was clear: if you cannot outrun them, make them stand still. But walls are static and people are not. Nomadic horsemen did not need to breach the wall, they only needed to find its gaps. 1,600 years later, the Ming Dynasty built the wall higher, thicker, and longer. At the Battle of Tumu Fortress, Emperor Yingzong led 200,000 troops on a northern campaign and was encircled by Oirat cavalry inside the wall's own perimeter. The emperor himself became a prisoner of war. The same prescription administered for 2,000 years. The same failure. The second strategy was subtler than wall building: buy peace with money. In the early Han Dynasty, Emperor Gaozu personally led an army north against the Xiongnu and was surrounded by 400,000 horsemen at Baideng Mountain for 7 days and 7 nights. He barely survived. This founding emperor, who had just won the brutal civil war against Chu, faced the steppe and recognized a simple reality: he could not win. The policy of Hecken began: marry a princess into the nomadic ruling house and send massive annual shipments of silk, grain, and gold. This was not submission, it was a transaction: resources in exchange for border calm, time in exchange for recovery. In the short term, it worked. But the nature of Hecken was feeding the other side, and a well-fed nomadic empire only grew larger, stronger, and hungrier. You were subsidizing your future enemy. The third strategy was the most satisfying: stop defending, stop paying, and attack. Emperor Wu of Han spent decades accumulating national strength, then launched a total war against the Xiongnu. In 119 BC, Huo Qubing led cavalry 2,000 li deep into the northern steppe all the way to Mount Langsu. A 21-year-old general stood at the farthest point the agrarian world had ever reached, built an altar, and made sacrifices to heaven. In the 2,000 years that followed, no army from the Central Plains would set foot there again. The Xiongnu were shattered, split apart, driven westward. The problem appeared to be solved at last. But the steppe does not disappear. The Xiongnu left, and the Xianbei arrived. The Xianbei faded, and the Turks rose. A military campaign could defeat one opponent, but could not destroy the soil that produced opponents. The cavalry returned to Chang'an, and within a single season, the grass grew back and new tribes were already growing up on horseback. The fourth strategy was the most ingenious. If you cannot eliminate them, turn them into your own. In the Tang Dynasty, Li Shimin was not only the emperor of China, but was also honored by the steppe peoples as Tian Kaihan, the heavenly Khan. He sat simultaneously atop 2 worlds, attempting to stitch the agrarian and nomadic orders together under a single dual identity: Of all the approaches, this was the most imaginative and the most fragile. It depended entirely on the personal prestige and skill of the supreme ruler. The moment central authority weakened, the stitching came apart. When the Anlushan rebellion erupted, the Tang court had to borrow troops from the very steppe peoples who had once submitted to it. Note the irony. The ultimate result of the absorption strategy was that the absorbed turned around and determined the empire's fate. 4 strategies across 2,000 years, each worked under specific conditions, each ultimately failed, but the failures were not caused by poor execution. They all traced back to the same structural mismatch. The agrarian empire drew its strength from concentration. Concentrated population, concentrated taxation, concentrated decision-making. This was the core logic of the unification operating system. But concentration meant slowness, rigidity, and resources locked to fixed land. Nomadic power was the exact inverse, rooted in dispersal and mobility. There was no capital to capture, no granary to burn, no bureaucracy to dismantle. A nomadic cavalry force could appear anywhere within 3 days. A military dispatch from Chang'an might take a month to reach the frontier. The larger the empire, the slower its reflexes. The longer the border, the more gaps to exploit. The stronger and more unified China became, the more irreconcilable the structural mismatch with the steppe grew. This mismatch eventually drove events toward an extreme. The northern adversaries were no longer hit-and-run raiders. They began studying Central Plains institutions and building stable states of their own. The Khitan founded the Liao dynasty and seized control of northern China. The Jurchen founded the Jin dynasty, drove their cavalry straight into the heartland, and broke through the walls of Kaifeng, the Song capital. In the first year of Jingkang, 2 emperors, Huizong and Qinzong, were stripped of their imperial robes, dressed in Jurchen garments, and loaded into prisoner carts. The convoy moved north along the imperial highway. Commoners knelt along the roadside weeping. The guards never looked back. The defensive line that had held for 1,000 years was not bypassed. It was punched through head-on. After that, the Mongol Empire dispensed with even this intermediate step. It swallowed China whole. Under Kublai Khan, the agrarian civilization was completely conquered by the steppe for the first time. This was not a change of dynasty. This was the most total victory the nomadic side ever achieved in that 2,000-year war. The system that allowed China to reunify again and again always had one vulnerability it could never patch. Every reunification was a system reboot, but the northern frontier was never part of the reboot's scope. It did not crash, it did not disappear. It simply waited, quietly, for the next dynasty to grow powerful again, to grow confident again, to believe once more that this time would be different. 2,000 years of war on the northern border proved not who won or who lost, but something far more unsettling. Some problems are not the kind that 2,000 years can solve.